I must tell you about the final student to visit my office and ask to play with the band. In walked Leonard, a kooky kind of skinny little guy with thinning black hair, checked shirt, bow tie, striped pants a couple of inches too long, and a thick Italian accent. He was a real character, but a very likable one after the initial shock of meeting him wore off. "What do you play, Lenny?" I asked, regretting my question before he even had a chance to answer it. "Nothing. Nah, I don't play an instrument, but I do play with the synthesizer. Ever heard of that before, Professor R?" Professor R? Oh, man, I was starting to feel really old. "No, Lenny, I can't say I have. Tell me about it." Lenny took the next half hour explaining the technicalities and techniques of the electronic synthesizer, the newest phenomenon to invade the music world. Frankly, I was lost in the explanation and told him so. "Oh, that's okay, Professor. I got mine out in my car. I can just go get it and play something for you. Wait here, I'll be right back." A few minutes later, Lenny stumbled into my office with his mechanical black box, eager to show me how it worked. Without a keyboard, he created the most unusual cacophony imaginable by plugging wires into all these little jacks on the front panel. My first thought was that Lenny was indeed a most unusual character. But then I thought to myself, hey, if I can find a place for Mike the violinist, I can certainly make a space for Lenny the synthesist. And that's exactly what I did. I couldn't have known it then, but our performance would make Lenny a living legend in the local community. The spring concert arrived all too quickly, considering the complexity of the performance I had masterminded. We all showed up at the high school auditorium that Saturday morning, eager to allow ourselves enough time to set up the stage and to run through a few rough spots in the music. By 2:30 that afternoon, we were ready to proceed with our 8 o'clock concert, so I let everyone go home and take a nap if they so desired, sternly warning all not to partake of anything that might negatively affect their performance that evening. Looking around the stage, I was dismayed that Lenny hadn't showed up. Indeed, he was destined to play an important role through the musical interplay I had designed between my recorder and his synthesizer during the first section of the concert. I stood there wondering if I would need to eliminate this important experiment in combining electronic and traditional musical textures. No sense worrying about that now, I convinced myself. Taking my own advice, I went home to our apartment and enjoyed some quiet time with the family. At 7 p.m. as ordered, the ensemble members showed up for their final pre-concert warm-up. At 7:15, as I began my typical pre-show pep talk, I noticed that Lenny still hadn't arrived, realizing that I'd have to scramble now to figure out how to modify the performance at the last moment. No sooner did I come to my decision than all the kids started laughing, hooting, and whistling. Turning from the podium to look out into the dark auditorium, in strolls Lenny, Mr. Cool, dressed in black leather jacket, black shirt, flowery red bow tie, and white pants. Even worse, his straggly hair was combed and oiled in place. I stifled a much-needed laugh and tore into Lenny as he hoisted his synthesizer onto the stage to prepare for his concert debut. "Lenny, where the hell have you been? Didn't I tell you to be here this morning along with everyone else?" "Ah, geez, Professor R, I spent the whole day practicing my part at home. I didn't want to disrupt the creative flow, you know what I mean?" Disrupt the creative flow? With no idea how to respond to that, I shook my head in mock disbelief while Lenny plugged his black monstrosity, synthesizer, into the PA system. All in all, this little scene provided an instant tension relief for everyone, including me. "Lenny, are you sure you're going to make it through the show?" "Hey, don't you worry about me, Professor R. I got some surprises up my sleeve." Oh, no. The hall filled slowly but surely as I peeked out every few minutes from stage left. By 8 o'clock, the auditorium was 3/4 full, with people still filing in. It wasn't until 8:15 that the house lights finally dimmed and the stage lights rose to full brightness, heralding the opening of the massive curtains. The ensemble already in place, I walked out onto the stage, as any conductor would do, acknowledging the restrained applause rippling through the hall. Reaching the podium, I glanced at the members of the band, noticing the looks on their faces which seemed to say, "Whoa, this is really happening. I sure hope we're ready." Turning to face them, I raised my baton along with my eyebrows, acknowledging the butterflies that were certainly by now invading their stomachs. Our first off-campus public performance began with Kevin playing the introduction on 12-string guitar, accompanied only by flute and violin. At the appropriate moment, I turned to face the audience and raised my recorder to my lips, introducing the melody that would weave its way through this entire first section of the performance. The music rose in intensity as layer upon layer of instruments entered on cue, bringing the audience to the first of many peaks, each higher than the one preceding it. About 5 minutes into the piece, it was time for Lenny and me to execute our seldom rehearsed interplay, designed as a musical conversation of sorts between the new world of electronic music and the old world of acoustic music. As I prepared to begin that musical conversation, I glanced over at Lenny, laughing inside to see him making the final adjustments to the front panel wires hanging out in all directions from his electronic contraption. As the only musician left playing, my recorder quite naturally mimicked the laughing mood I felt, happily tossing out short musical bursts in Lenny's direction. I spoke, he answered. He spoke, I responded in kind. Before long, we were engaged in a rather nice conversation about the nature of music, reveling in our entrance into the unexplored world of free-form jazz. While the volume on Lenny's synthesizer might have been a little more than too loud for the older members of the audience, the youngsters responded favorably with fists thrust into the air in the common practice. I had to admit, despite having no formal musical training, Lenny was contributing a remarkably musical element to our dialogue. This surprised me. It also pleased me. When our musical conversation eventually diminished, as any dialogue must, to a pleasant goodbye, I launched right into the next section of the concert with an up-tempo jazz fusion introduction on recorder. 8 bars later, Jim kicked in on drums, Bill on piano, Kevin back on the bass, and Bob on electric guitar. The remainder of the show flew by in a flash. As the ensemble members took their bows to generous applause at the conclusion of the performance that night, you won't be surprised to learn that Lenny received a most raucous standing ovation. A legend had been born. Some 30 years later, he would earn his character role as the inimitable Lenny D, an eccentric yet lovable gangster in my fantasy fiction music novels, Stardust and Wrong Time, Wrong Place. I wonder if he knows.